The Hall of Fame class is 7 people. And I saw Jerry Jones was getting his bust worked on today. He's had his face worked on before. Nothing new. All right. Kenny Easley got in. I like Kenny Easley get in. It's like one of the few kind of old school names. Like, oh, Kenny Easley, Seahawks, liked him. Must have been good. Can't tell you. I mean, like, look, we didn't have breakdowns of guys back then, but he finally got in. Terrell Davis got in. Klug, you happy with that? Georgia guy, right? Georgia guy.
I got to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have any tie or connection to Terrell Davis from Georgia. I was happier for Kurt Warner.
For Kurt Warner getting in?
He's been so good to us over the years. I felt more of a connection to him than to Terrell Davis.
Okay. Do they belong in the Hall of Fame? It's a weird thing. Like, I had Kurt Warner on, and I thought I asked him, fair questions, right? Like, those weren't hater questions. They were, like, legit, like, how do we get to your Hall of Fame? Like, we had 5 bad years. Like, bad. We had, like, 4 or 5 great years. You had 5 bad years. Like, that don't make no sense. And so I asked him if he thought, like, does being a great guy, does that get you in? And I know he has these incredible numbers in the Super Bowl. Some of that was, though, that their offense was ahead of the curve. I actually sat with Torrey Holt, who lost in the wash, probably not getting in, all-decade team, but probably not getting in the Hall of Fame. But Torrey Holt was kind of teaching me Mike Martz's offense, which they did the same thing everybody else did, just a little bit different. Like, everything was a 7-step drop, and instead of running routes, running comebacks at 12 yards, they would do 18 yards. Like, everything was a little bit different. It's like the McDowells to the McDonald's. But Terrell Owens didn't get in. And Terrell Owens was a dominant wide receiver. And if you read from themmqb.com, that's when Peter King lets the world in on the voting. Remember, they first cut it to 10. And in his final 10, he had Terrell Owens. He had Morton Anderson, Tony Baselli. Baselli should get in. He was a great left tackle. Among others, he had Ty Law. He had, who else then? John Lynch, Terrell Owens, LaDainian Tomlinson, Kurt Warner. The actual final 10 was Morton Anderson, Tony Baselli, Terrell Davis, Brian Dawkins, Ty Law, John Lynch, Kevin Mawai, and it was Jason Taylor. The Hall of Fame just got better looking with Jason Taylor. Like, how good? Like, that dude's way too good looking to be a great football player. LaDainian Tomlinson and Kurt Warner. So Paul Tagliabue didn't get in. Peter King writes, my feeling is that Tagliabue could not overcome the impression that has dogged him since he left offense. He wasn't serious enough or protective enough about getting to the bottom line effects of head trauma. Of course, earlier in the week, he had apologized for comments about head trauma. He also writes that Terrell Owens may be far away from Canton. Marginally, I support Owens and would have voted for him. This is Peter King from Sports Illustrated. From the cut down to 10-5, had he made it. He did not. He's second all-time in receiving yards, third in receiving touchdowns, eighth in receptions. But he's first in divisiveness and churlishness, and that's what seems to be keeping him out. My guess is that after leaving the meeting Saturday, it could be a few years before Owens gets in, if he ever does. I sense the American outrage over this. I get it. It's a story of how much should apply to the player's case in the Hall of Fame. Should Andy Reid suspending Owens and basically firing him in his prime play into it? Should hopscotching from team to team because of his behavior be part of it? We asked about whether we should only consider what happens on the field with one proviso. If something factors into how or whether a player plays, and if something factors into the tangible effect of the team's performance, such as the lack of leadership, we consider it. I think that's reasonable. I really do. I don't think that Terrell Owens is definitely not getting in, but as of right now, you're not going to reward him by putting him ahead of players whose teammates loved him. Loved him. There's a couple things. Yes, the receiving numbers and receiving yards, all of those are spectacular. Remember, some of that comes from the teams he played on. Some of it comes from his dominance as a player, but some of it comes from the teams he played on. Like when he was with the San Francisco 49ers, like they were still ahead of the curve terms of how much and how effectively they threw. Also, it has to do with the generation. He is kind of the first of this generation of athlete. He also played a long time. But this is like, like Drew Brees' is passing numbers are going to be crazy because he's in this passing generation. There are more plays, more passes thrown, thus more pass yards for both wide receivers and for quarterbacks. But here's why I don't mind this. Football is a team game. I love basketball because 5 players have to play as one in order to be effective. It is an incredible team game. It's not as much of a team game, to be terribly honest, to be terribly candid with you, as football is. Now, on a football play, like you run a sweep, a wide receiver can just go grab the defensive back and kind of block him and kind of play brother-in-law ball and not do anything. So not all 11 players are involved in every play, but generally it all has to work together symbiotically in order to work. And what does it say about Terrell Owens? Where everywhere he left, they felt better because he wasn't there. Did he play through injury? He did. He did. In Philadelphia, like Alex Mack yesterday, broken bone in his leg, came back early, played well in the Super Bowl. But he also called out his quarterback after the Super Bowl for throwing up, for in his mind being intimidated. He was incredibly divisive in a sport in which you have to be unified in order to succeed, right? So I don't think that's lost on football writers. I don't think there's some grudge they carried. I think they saw him for what he really was. Troubled guy, crazy, awful story of upbringing that managed to make it out and make himself into something spectacular. But in the best of the best, like, can you be a Hall of Famer when everybody wanted to get rid of you the second they got you? The difference in Randy Moss is that he was a pain in the ass in Oakland. But he wasn't, for the most part, in Minnesota and in New England. It ended badly in New England, but it almost always ends poorly and prematurely in New England for everybody. Like, that was the whole thing with Tom Brady, is like he might want to play to his 42, 43, but that's not how New England rolls, right? He's been willing to take less money. So I don't think it's crazy to keep him out. Do I think eventually he'll get in? You know, it kind of make you grovel a little bit, make you feel a little bit more normal. Like, we reserve first ballot Hall of Famers for LaDainian Tomlinson, beloved player. Now, look, LT gets a pass for not playing with a sprained knee in AFC Championship game when Phillip Rivers had a torn ACL and played in the exact same game, and LT lost the locker room after that game. Lost it. They go to play New England after upsetting the Indianapolis Colts, and I love LT. And he was classy, and he was elegant, and he was productive, and he did it between the tackles, he did it outside the tackles, and he did it catching out of the backfield. Like, he did everything. He was a consummate pro, a great running back. But he didn't play hurt in the AFC Championship game. But LT was beloved. There's not that feeling of warmth towards Terrell Owens. There's that begrudging respect of, had a lot of catches, had a lot of yards. So I think eventually he'll get in. And I think right now the feeling is, we got some guys, we'll get to you. We're kind of backed up here.